Perfect. It's always hard to keep things moving, but I think we have to just in the light of time just to make sure we get everyone in there. So next up, we're going to hear from Andrea. Hi, Andrea. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
Am I saying your name correctly? Is the
Yeah,
next
you are
question.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And you're joining us from UCD today.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Really, really looking forward to because we hear about UCD being a kind of leader in this field, but we don't necessarily hear what's happening on the day to day. So really excited to hear your presentation.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Are you able to share slides?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
You'd like to share your own, yeah.
Now, is that okay?
I think it's coming up. Yeah. Yep.
All good there.
Yeah. So you'll have to click. Yeah. Yep. That's perfect. Looks good.
Okay,
Thanks, Andrea. Take it away whenever you're ready.
perfect. So first of all, thank you to Ahead for having me. Last year I attended my first Gather event, and was actually freshly stepping into the world of AT. So my name is Aundrea Hubble, and I work in Access and Lifelong Learning in UCD. And I've been in this role for about a year and have been working in this center for 2 years now. So today, I'm going to just briefly give an overview of the AT service at UCD. I'm going to talk a bit about, well, mainly about Grammarly and the GDPR process we recently went through. And then at the end, just briefly cover the future plans for the AT service as I'm relatively new to the role. So being new to the role, it has come with an absolute whirlwind first year, getting settled and just seeing the processes and how everything works here. I was trying to kind of reflect on the past year and see how I could kind of best contribute to today, because I do feel extremely new to the industry and to the role. Um, and it's always changing. So it's very easy to feel like you're maybe inexperienced in the role, and I wanted to be able to contribute something quite useful today. So that's why I kind of decided on talking about Grammarly, because I know it's been talked about a lot in the field, especially in third level education, just around GDPR and the fact that it's an American company, and data processing being sent to the US. So full disclaimer, it might not be the most exciting presentation, but I do think it has a lot of value, especially to other third level education or any institutions that might be considering Grammarly. And just looking at it, it's kind of really daunting with all the terminology and all the GDPR requirements that go with it. So yeah, been here for about a year. UCD currently is supporting just over 3,700 students this academic term, which was an increase of about 10% from last year. So I think across the board, everyone is seeing that it's growing year on year, which can make doing our job quite challenging because you want to be able to offer the best quality service that you can. When there's a high demand, it can be quite challenging. So to avail of AT one-on-one, the student must first register with our disability service. So as UCD is quite at the forefront of universal design, I was looking with the high demand on the service, how can we combine the two? So some of the mainstream AT that we have at the moment, which I'd like to see us increase that, is Ally and Brightspace. So it's the accessibility checker for academics or anyone that might be putting material on Brightspace. And it also allows for students to convert any of their learning material into a format that suits them best. And then another one that we have on the UCD website is Census Access, which is a file conversion tool. So again, you can put any material into there and it will come out in a format, whether it's MP3, a Word document, PDF, whatever suits you. Now, the one thing I've learned over this year is that it really matters kind of the quality of what you're putting into these pieces of software to get something out of it that's going to be useful and be a good format. So then, of course, with the high demand on the service, a lot of what we do is trying to leverage what's already built into different computers or softwares that students are already using, because trying to introduce new technology with a full student workload can be quite challenging. So we try to draw on a lot of these features that are already there, which I'm sure many people are already familiar with. So things like built-in magnification in Zoom, could be dictate in Word, different reading modes on browsers or that are built into the computer. And then just some of the other software that we use, and we acquire licenses for are Genio, Read and Write, Natural Reader, Grammarly, Quatio, Dragon, Fusion, and other similar softwares. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the service and the things that I've kind of picked up on over the last year. One of the major projects that I took on this year was starting to, I guess, go through the process of acquiring Grammarly. Since I started this role, it'd been a major topic amongst other universities, as well as the students were frequently asking for it more than any other software. We received multiple emails a week looking for licenses for Grammarly. I didn't quite know why we didn't have a license with Grammarly until I started asking questions. And a lot of it stemmed from just lack of knowledge around GDPR and what would need to be done to get that. So me being quite naive, at the end of July last year, I said, well, do you know what? I've got 5-6 weeks until the academic term starts. That's great. I'll get that done and we'll have that by the start of term. And little did I know, it was the end of January before we had finalized everything. So it took a lot longer than I was expecting. And now that is partly because I was navigating it for the first time. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of terminology. It can be quite daunting. And so you'll see that through the rest of this presentation. And so I've tried to break it down as much as possible, but I'll give my email at the end. So if anyone is interested or wants to maybe start looking into going through this process, then I'm happy to help and answer any questions. The interesting thing is, although there is a lot to navigate, a lot of the time you are the middle person. So you're communicating with other departments, you're communicating with Grammarly to get everything done that needs to be done. So you're kind of passing things back and forth, and you don't have to really have a really deep knowledge on it, but looking at it from the outside, it can be quite daunting for sure. So the departments that I had to engage with, both inside of UCD and external to us, was the Data Protection Office, which sometimes I might reference as the DPO. I'll try to say Data Protection Office instead. Some legal advisors, our IT service, so information technology, our procurement team, and then Grammarly. So Grammarly had their own legal team, their own tech engineers, and their management team, their sales team. So it was quite a multidisciplinary approach. Lots of back and forth for about 6-7 months. So this is kind of a checklist of all the major GDPR, I guess, milestones that we had to complete. And I'm going to go through each one of them and kind of break them down just to explain what they are, because when you see this and you see all the acronyms like TIA, IT, DPIA, it just can be quite overwhelming. I remember how I felt when I started, and I just felt way in over my head and didn't even know where to start. But that's why you have kind of the support of the Data Protection Office and everyone else to help clarify and guide you and direct you throughout it. So the transfer impact assessment is something that is required if you are engaging with a company that is outside of the EU. So even if you decide that you don't need to do a transfer impact assessment, you still have to go through the process of completing it and demonstrating that you don't need it. So there's questions you have to answer to then come to the conclusion that you don't need a formal transfer impact assessment. So this was outlined on the UCD Data Protection Office website. So I went through their questions and answered them as simple as that. So I suppose the whole idea of the transfer impact assessment is that under GDPR, personal data cannot leave the EU to another country unless it has proven to have protections as strong as the EU. So the EU and the US have an agreement between countries about sharing data, and it's called the Data Privacy Framework. So if a company is registered with this framework, it's giving what they call an adequacy decision, meaning that the EU considers that company to be certified as safe under that framework. So lucky for us, Grammarly was on that framework. If not, it may not have been possible to facilitate all of this. And one of the key parts where the gaps in I suppose, data protection legislations between countries was the fact that Grammarly used end-to-end encryption. So even when it got to the US, it was already encrypted. I have some links on this slide, just that link to the UCD's Data Protection Office website with more information about transfer impact assessments if anyone's interested. So then next, once we realized we didn't need a TIA and we'd saved that file that we completed those questions, we received a security cloud checklist, or rather the Data Protection Office advised us to reach out to our IT department. So IT had this checklist of many, many questions, which luckily we did not have to answer. So we downloaded it and we sent it to Grammarly, and Grammarly answered all the questions. So really for us, it was hands off, which was good because there was quite a lot on it. And this is where we were kind of the middle person. We sent it back to IT, and IT, gave us any relevant questions or recommendations about things we needed to look into further or get further clarification from Grammarly. So again, this was just being the middle person. We didn't have to have any specialist knowledge. We were just communicating with the two areas. Again, I have a link on this page here about IT guidance from UCD's department there on international data transfers. And then the data protection impact assessment was the next bit. So this was probably the most work we had to do ourselves. So this was directly from the Data Protection Office, and it was just a few pages of questions we had to answer and information about how we'd be using Grammarly, what kind of personal information we would be entering into it, like student emails. And it's kind of like a risk assessment, really, and what we would be doing to reduce any risk. So we completed this document, we shared it with the Data Protection Office, they reviewed it, and this went back and forth maybe 2 or 3 times. Again, this was something that I was looking at the sheet, I was reading it, and I felt a bit out of my depth. There were a lot of terms I wasn't aware of, but the Data Protection Office was really good at helping. You could ask any questions, and they were very clear coming back with what they needed us to look into further. So some of the main feedback that brought a bit more work on our plate was we needed to complete a privacy notice for the students to read. We needed to provide them with user guidelines. And we then needed to review Grammarly's sub-processors, which was sort of something that came in at the last minute. And I thought I was nearly going to have to do the whole process again for their sub-processors. So that was a bit of a hurdle, but it wasn't too bad actually, because we weren't going to be using the AI feature in Grammarly. So I think they have 12 sub-processors. So it actually knocked it down to only 2 sub-processors, which all had adequacy decisions. So it really was actually relatively quite quick. And then the privacy notice and user guidelines, I was able to look at different ones that were out there, look at what was required to be in them based on GDPR guidelines. And they're on our website as well if anyone would like to read through them. So the privacy notice for students that we had to draft up was quite easy to do because GDPR was quite specific on what needed to be in that. So we had to explain that UCD was a data controller and Grammarly was a data processor, the types of data that would be collected, so students' email, our legal basis for using Grammarly, the fact that AI wasn't going to be used. We had to highlight to them that the data was going to be transferred internationally and where it's stored. These are all points that are outlined in GDPR, so it was quite easy to go through each one of them and write a few sentences about each. So about their data protection rights, who they can contact if they have any questions or concerns, and everything around retention and deletion. I've linked on this slide as well a link directly to our privacy notice for Grammarly if anyone wants to have a read of that. And then the user guidelines was easy enough as well because it was directed by the DPO some of the things that we needed to consider in the user guidelines. So this was the idea that we recommend that they only use Grammarly on their laptop or desktop, so not on their phone. Avoid using it with high-risk emails. If you're doing any sensitive work, which is outlined in the user guidelines. So if you are, say, for example, you're studying medicine and for some reason you're working on medical records or case study, you would need to be signing out of Grammarly to use those. And it would outline the steps for logging out of Grammarly. And then another key factor for being able to get Grammarly was that it is not available for staff to use because staff are, using are answering student emails, are logged into different portals that have sensitive information on it. So this is all outlined in the user guidelines. It outlines what is sensitive special category data. And the students would have to read this and confirm to us that they've read it before we would allow them to receive a Grammarly account. And again, it's linked on this slide if you'd like to read that. And then finally, we had to do the data processing agreement. So this is essentially the contract between ourselves and Grammarly. Now, in the middle of this process, Grammarly and a company called Superhuman, I suppose they kind of became one. So we had to change a bit of our process and rename the contract with Superhuman on it instead of Grammarly. This was probably the process that took the longest. I'd say this took 3 to 4 months. And again, nothing too difficult on our end. We were the middle person. We were sending the edits back and forth between our legal advisors and Grammarly's legal advisors. So I actually can't remember how many times we went back and forth, but this took the longest amount of time, but didn't require any really specialist knowledge from me. So we got everything over the line, which was really great and a massive relief. But the main point is that, things are always changing, as we know, in the world. And, tomorrow that adequacy decision could be gone or the framework could be changed. So it's something that we always have to be aware of. And if it changes at any time, like, we need to potentially review where we're at with the agreement and if it's still upheld and if they're still meeting GDPR requirements, just to best safeguard our students. Another bit just on the AI feature, of course, there's a lot of positive benefits that AI features can have. However, like a lot of other institutions, we choose to turn it off just to protect academic integrity. They do have a feature that when it's on, it's called authorship. So basically, if a student is working on a document, they can print out a report that identifies what is their work and what is not their work, which they could submit to the lecturer if that was an avenue that the school wanted to go down. But for the moment, we have decided not to have the AI on. So how we do this is the student has their needs assessment and we talk about supports, and the support that we put in place is the use of proofreading software. So that would be the support that allows them to use Grammarly. Some students have requested that the student puts a line at the start of their assignment stating that they've used Grammarly. And this is a similar process to our spelling and grammar waiver on a written assignment. There hasn't been any real issues so far. I mean, we've only had one semester of it being active. We did raise concerns with Grammarly that some feedback we had heard from other universities was that it was flagging plagiarism checkers, and they were already aware of that, and they'd already fixed something in the background that was setting it off. So before we had kind of finished up with everything, they had advised us that that had been looked at and sorted. So our goal is to kind of review this over the summer, see how students got on with it in the second academic term from January to May, and just get some feedback and hopefully get into a bit more training with the students so that they can use it effectively. I think it's a very good tool, and just some of the kind of verbal face-to-face feedback we've had from students has been positive so far, especially since it was such a demand for the last couple of years of emails from students asking for us to get this. So just kind of broadening back out, I suppose, to future plans for AT within UCD. I really want to kind of focus on how we can really build this service with universal design in mind. So I think that we have the potential to mainstream a lot more assistive technology. So that's something I'm going to be spending a lot of my summer on because, as we've already discussed, there's a high demand on the service, and there's a lot of AT that could be mainstreamed and support a lot of students. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start looking at, some text to speech software and different things like that and put a case together for mainstreaming those. So I'm getting to the end here. So I just wanted to kind of state the vision and mission of UCD because I really try to, anything I'm thinking about for developing the AT service, I try to keep these things in mind. So the vision is that UCD will be a university all where all students, regardless of background or circumstance, feel welcome, belong, and are valued. In doing so, all students can undertake their studies, participate fully in the life of the university, and realize their academic, professional, career, and personal goals. So when I see that or I hear that, I think about the AT being kind of the right fit and really working with the student to make sure it's going to be the best tool that's going to help them to be successful in their university life and beyond. And that we're doing the training with them so that they don't have that drop off because it's a lot on their plate. So it's really like working with them to find the best tool to support them. And then the mission is UCD Access and Lifelong Learning, work to enable the university to fully realize its ambitions to be a university for all, where access and inclusion is everyone's business. So when I think of this in the context of assistive technology, I think about how many different contexts I've had within the university and outside of the university in order to make the implementation of AT successful, from teaching staff to students to external service providers. So it's really quite a broad approach to make sure that you get the right AT in place, and that everyone's involved in making sure the material and the assistive technology is accessible. So that's kind of a whistle stop tour. Maybe not the most exciting, but I do think that it might help to maybe make the process a little less daunting if someone is thinking about going down that road. So my email, if anyone is interested, is aundrea.hubble@ucd.ie.
Well, thanks, Andrea. A huge amount of work that goes into getting things done with the AT sphere. I didn't realize how much back and forth there was.
Yeah, it took quite a while.
Yeah, but it was successful, so it was worth
It
it.
was. Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
e- Even just for one student, it'd be successful.
Mm,
There is a comment coming in there, so it's just great to hear that Grammarly is coming forth to address the issues related to GDPR and intellectual property.
mhm.
So compared with other IA language models, so I think yeah, it's kind of at the forefront, but it's still a whole lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Danielle's also saying it's great to have someone explain the complicated nature of AT and data protection because it's like from the outside it looks so simple, but clearly, as we've learned, it's not very simple, is it?
No, it's not. And I was kind of worried about presenting on it because I know you can just kind of hear it or look at it and just be completely overwhelmed and switch off completely. But maybe if it can be broken down a bit and be like, it's okay, it's not as bad as it looks.
Yeah.
Maybe it might encourage people to start that process.
Yeah, and it's definitely applicable at other institutions as well. So I know there's a lot of AT officers in our audience. So
Mm.
yeah, might even reach out to Andrea for some
Yeah,
tips
of
and
course.
tricks.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea.
You're
Good
welcome.
to hear from you.